Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila, and I'm glad to be back with you. I hope you enjoyed my daughter's stories the last few weeks. Well, my voice isn't quite well, so you'll have to put up with me. Sometimes I sound like Donald Duck, but hopefully you can still hear the story. Our story today is called Saved by a Crocodile. Whew, a crocodile. Well, a long time before this story happened, missionaries had gone into the jungle by the big wide river. And there they had taken their machetes and they chopped down all the vines. And they made a nice flat area there by the river, and they built a mission school. Well, that school had been there a long time, and the missionaries, they told those boys and girls about Jesus, and the boys and girls learned all their schoolwork as well. And a lot of those boys and girls had given their hearts to Jesus because they knew that Jesus loved them and he would save them from their sins. There was one little boy, and his name was Sambo, and he hadn't given his heart to Jesus. Do you know why? Because he liked to not obey the rules. He liked to not obey Jesus. He liked to do what he wanted to do because he thought it was fun. He didn't want to give up his fun things. His name was Sambo. And Sambo, he was always misbehaving, and he was always getting into trouble. And the missionary, they had thought, well, I guess we'll just have to send him back home to the village. But they liked Sambo, so they would forgive him for the bad things he had done, and they would give him another chance. Kind of like Jesus gives us chances again when we do things that we know we're not supposed to. Well, Sambo, although he misbehaved all the time, the other boys loved him. And one of the reasons they loved him so much was Sambo. He could swim like nobody else. He was really, really fast. And the boys thought he was a hero because he could swim so fast. Well, one morning, the boys had all gone to school. Their classes were all done. And you know, there was no running water at the mission school. So everybody had to walk from the mission school down to that big flowing river. And that's where they took their baths. Sounds funny, huh? Well, they had all taken their baths and they were laying out on the sandy bank, drying off. And they were laying there just like boys would, with their hands behind their heads. And one of the boys said to Sambo, "Why don't you swim across the river? We can count to see how long it takes you to come and to go there and come back." Well, Sambo, he thought about that. And he thought, he said, "I could." And the boys said, "You're afraid." Sambo said, "I am not." "Then why don't you do it?" said another. But in the back of Sambo's mind, the other thing that Sambo was thinking about was there was a school rule that said the boys could swim along the edge of the river on the mission side, but they must never swim across the river to the other side. Well, why would the teacher say such a thing? That would be fun, right? Sambo, he was thinking about that rule, is what he was thinking about. And there was good reason. There was a bad current that ran through the river that could just pull you down the river. It wasn't safe. Plus, the river on that side was full of crocodiles. Big, hungry crocodiles with great big mouths that opened and shut. And they were strong enough to haul away a little boy. But when Sambo didn't get up to go, the weather boys started taunting him again. They said, "Sure enough, you're afraid. You won't go." And Sambo said, "I will." "Well, when will you go?" Before they knew what was happening, Sambo jumped up and he jumped into that river and he started to swim with his little brown arms. Faster and faster and faster he swam. The boys were so excited they were clapping. They'd never seen anybody swim that fast. But Sambo, he kept swimming. And the boys were counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Sambo, he swam on. He swam carefully through that current. He swam on through the deep water. He swam and he swam and he swam while the boys kept counting till he stood up and walked out of that water and he went, "I did it! Yay, I did it!" And the boys on this side, they all collapsed and they said, "Sambo did it! Sambo did it!" Well, then Sambo had to swim all the way back. He took just a couple minutes to catch his breath. And then once again, he slid into the water of that river and he started to swim and swim and swim. Now you got to remember that Sambo was probably tired from swimming all that way. But he was swimming not quite as fast as he had going, but he was swimming hard, and the boys were counting again. And then, all of a sudden, while the boys were watching, in the middle of that river, it happened. One of the boys went, "Sambo, Sambo, be careful. Sambo, there's a crocodile." Well, Sambo had always said, "I can outswim the crocs. They can't hurt me," he would boast. But now Sambo, he looked behind him, and there was that crocodile, and it was swimming. Yes, it looked like just a log floating toward him, but on the front of that log were two big eyes, and they were cruelly looking at Sambo, and I bet his mind was going, "Lunch?" And Sambo, his eyes got big and he swam faster and faster and faster. and he started to move away from that crocodile, leaving the crocodile back here. But you can only swim that fast so long. And Sambo, he couldn't hardly breathe. He'd been swimming so hard. But he kept swimming. Surely he could make it. But here Sambo went, and right behind him, getting closer and closer and closer, was that big crocodile. And as the boys stood there and yelled and screamed, that big crocodile came to the surface, and he opened that huge mouth, and snap, it went on Sambo, and Sambo disappeared down under the water. Oh, oh! And the boys got up. They grabbed their clothes and they ran as fast as they could to the mission station. Help! Help! A crocodile has Sambo! Help! Help! The missionary, he listened to their story very quickly, and he immediately rang the bell that told all the other missionaries they were needed at the school. And everybody ran, and they heard the story of Sambo. And the missionary said, make little search groups, go up and down the river on both sides. A crocodile does not eat his prey right away. There's one chance in 100 that Sambo may still be alive. So they went searching as fast as they could, looking and calling for Sambo. Meanwhile, Sambo was caught. His legs were caught in the mouth of that big crocodile, and the crocodile was swimming under the water. Oh, boys and girls, what happens if you can't breathe? Well, Sambo couldn't breathe under that water. He was terrified. But finally, he went unconscious, and the crocodile just kept pulling him through the water because Sambo wasn't getting any air. Well, the crocodile, he took Sambo to his lair, which was where he really lived, his home. And he put Sambo on that sandy sandbank, and with his little short feet, he started throwing sand all over Sambo. Then he got up, and with his long nose, he started pushing on broken branches and rocks that were sitting along the bank, and he pushed them over, and they landed with a thud on top of Sambo. But Sambo was out cold. Pretty soon, the crocodile decided he'd sufficiently covered Sambo, and he slipped back into the river to go find another prey to go with his Sambo sandwich for lunch. Well, Sambo lay there, and pretty soon he started to cough. He had gotten water in his lungs, and he coughed, and then he slowly opened his eyes, and he looked around. Where am I? And then he remembered the crocodile, and he looked down, and he was covered with rocks and sand and big branches and small logs. He couldn't get out. And he opened his mouth. He was gonna scream. He was so scared. But then he remembered that crocodile What if the crocodile was close and heard him scream and came back for lunch? So he lay there quiet on the sand. Do you know what he thought about, boys and girls? He thought about the stories of Jesus coming to this earth to save us. He thought about those, and he thought about what the missionaries had told them about talking to Jesus, how he wanted to help you, and how Jesus wanted to save us from sin or the bad things we do, and that he wanted to take us home to heaven someday. And Sambo, he remembered that he had only wanted to do all those bad things. And now he looked up and he went, Jesus. And then he said, I want to be your boy. I promise to be good after this. Can I be your boy? Will you save me? Well, it wasn't too long till Sambo heard big tromping footsteps. He thought, it can't be the crocodile. Then he looked up into the face of the missionary teachers, and they went, oh, Sambo. And as quick as they could, they threw those rocks off. They pushed the logs off. They got the branches off. And they had brought a stretcher with them, and they gently lifted Sambo onto the stretcher. Sambo's legs were hurt really bad from those big crocodile teeth. They carried Sambo back to the mission, and they nursed Sambo back to health. But you know, Sambo could never walk good anymore. He had to walk with crutches, and everybody else was sad. But Sambo, he was always happy now, and he always minded the rules, and he always told other people about the Jesus that had saved him. Do you know, Sambo is not a little boy anymore. He's a grown-up man that's working for Jesus from his crutches. And you know, the story was called Saved by a Crocodile. Well, Sambo had been saved by the crocodile for his lunch. But Jesus saved Sambo forever from his sins. Thank you, boys and girls. I'll see you next week. Maybe I won't sound like Donald Duck then. Bye-bye.